Okay, perfect. Thank you. So today I'm speaking about how we manage access at Instruct, and to give a very brief introduction to Instruct so everyone knows who we are and what we do. So we are a research infrastructure in Europe, which has currently 14 member states and organizations, and those host 11 different centers with 27 facilities that provide access to researchers from our member countries and from beyond. We do offer research visits, but we also have very active training programs, internships, and an R&D funding program. In terms of research visits that we are focusing on today, for example, in last year alone, we had over 135 visits from users, which resulted in more than 1,000 days of actual user access to facilities. And that is quite a significant number, and it means that we can't, or we don't want to handle that all by pen and paper, but we have an access management system in place that reliably helps us support all the users and facilities while we are having such large numbers of visits. And we are doing that using ARIA. So ARIA is a cloud-based platform that is an access management system specifically developed and supported by Instruct for Instruct, but we are also using it for EC-funded projects. Other research infrastructures are now using it, as well as independent research facilities. And it has quite a lot of functions. So it can be used for facility management, where it can be used for user management, bookings of machines, for data management, community management, which is partially what we're using it for in eRimote, for the website and the knowledge platform that we are developing. But what I'm going to focus on today is the access management. And what I've shown here is just a small diagram on how it connects people, because it's the one point where we have the researchers that ask for access and perform experiments, connected with moderators and reviewers that assess how good the project is and if it's feasible for funding. Then the operators in the facilities that, especially in remote access, are performing quite a lot of the experiments and need to be in constant communication with the researchers. But it also links us to the administrators in Instruct. So if there's any follow-ups or needs that either of the participants have, we can follow the process and make sure everything goes to plan. So what kind of does that mean in practice? So I'm going to go briefly through this and then focus on specific points. So in ARIA, we can open specific calls. In Instruct, we have a permanently open call, but we can also have topic-specific calls that we open specifically for a specific topic. And then we can advertise this. Users can apply through the platform to that. And that means we have a custom application form and they select services and machines. That's a point I'm going to come back to later, because this is also where remote access can be chosen. Then the proposal is evaluated by scientific review, technical review, all of those communications and outcomes are automatically recorded. And then the project visit happens. That's the second point I'm going to spend a bit more time on later, because this is where the remote access really comes into fruition with different types of workflows and communication that is super important at this stage. And then in the outcome, we also get statistics and reporting that's automatically generated. So focusing on the machines and service selection. So for Instruct, we have nearly 80 services at the moment available. And these are incredibly heterogeneous. So it ranges from protein production all the way through X-ray crystallography. And all of those services have different requirements, whether they can be performed in person, whether they need a specialist to perform it for you, or whether you can go and do it yourself, or any type of combination of that. At the moment, we have about half of those services where the users can choose in communication with the facility to see what is the most appropriate for their application. But there are specific ones that are only available in physical access or in remote access. Because we have such a heterogeneity in services and options, I'm just going to spend today on nanobody discovery as the example workflow that I'll choose to show you how we are dealing with remote access, because this is an incredibly lengthy process that most of the time, nearly all of the time, it is done remotely because no one has sufficient time to spend waiting in a different country while the llama is inoculated. So I've mentioned before that we are linking users and administrators and facility organizers. So I'm going to slightly switch sometimes between what does the center or facility manager see and what does the user see, and how we're linking those. So in terms of service and machine selection, for each of the services in ARIA, there is a description and it gets registered. And what I want to point out here is that the facility has the option to choose whether it is remote, physical, or a combination of that. And from an Instruct point of view, we don't really distinguish here whether remote access is fully remote, where a user sends a sample and then just gets data back when it's processed, or whether this includes remote control, for example, for electron microscopy. This is very common. We leave that up to the facility what suits them best. And the other thing that I wanted to point out here is the workflow, which is something I'm going to come back for later, because especially for lengthy processes that are remote, this is really important to make sure that everything goes to plan and is recorded appropriately. From a user point of view, when they select the service, again, in this case, nanobody discovery, they get the option to choose what modality they want, if applicable. If only one is available, there's clearly not a choice to be had. But even if a user chooses a certain modality, there will be discussion with the facility before the visit happens to make sure that this actually is appropriate for their type of experiment. Now going to the actual visit, which is where it really diverges between remote and physical access. All of that, as I've mentioned before, is managed in ARIA. This is roughly the view that you had as a facility manager. So you can see all the visits that are currently going on in your facility or that have gone on, that are currently under evaluation. And you can also, I hope you can see this on the top with my pointer, filter them for whether this is a remote or physical access if you choose to do so. And with the example of this ongoing access here, this is where we really dive into having a workflow that people are using. And nanobodies is quite a nice example because, as I said, it's so lengthy, it has loads of steps, and this is how they follow it. So once the session to discover the antibody is going on, there's different steps like sample shipping. Once the sample is shipped, the facility acknowledge that they have received it, ticked it off, and then it goes to the next step. And that way they can follow quite clearly where in the process they are and can communicate with the users where they are at and if they need anything. And to make that as easy as possible is, once selecting a certain step, there's always a discussion option that automatically links the user and the facility, and they have a discussion box. So in this case here, it links the center contacts with the service contacts. So this might be the specialist working on this very much machine, and then the user, which I have redacted here. It means that once the message is sent to say, we need more specifications, or we at this stage, we need more advice here, or want to discuss something, it makes it very easy for the facility and the remote user to be in constant interaction and know which stage they're at. Which brings me to another feature that is quite linked and partially shown here, which is the communication setting in ARIA. So all of the communication between the user and the facility ideally goes through ARIA, because it means that it is automatically linked to the proposal and to the visit. So any communication and discussion and maybe needs can be recorded in one place. And you can quite easily, by clicking on a button on the top, see the proposal, see the visit, see where the visit's at, and then communicate appropriately between the user and the admin center. And if need be, we can add or remove people as needed to make the communication as best as possible. And especially if the person is not directly on hand, it is really important to keep the user informed on what the status is and how best to proceed. And this is basically accessible for both the administrators of the service as well as the users. You don't have to use the messaging in ARIA, it also forwards to email, but this is the most convenient way to make sure all the information is in one place and immediately linked to the proposal and the visit. From a user point of view, whenever they want to check where their project's at, they go onto the user dashboard, and the user dashboard shows different options, obviously to start a new proposal, but it also shows the projects that are currently going on, and it has a view proposal option, and that gives you more details on where you currently are in the process. So in my lovely example here, you can see it has already progressed from technical evaluation, it's past that step. It's currently in progress, and once that's completed and the antibodies are generated and delivered, it goes to feedback and then finally to completed. However, one of the things you can notice here is that the granularity that the user currently sees is not as good as what the facility manager sees. So the facility manager can see all the workflow steps and acknowledge and complete them as is going on, while this is not so apparent currently for the users, which means the messaging system is much more important to make sure that the facility constantly can update the users on what the status is. And this is one of the things that we have identified as a point of improvement. So as part of the eRemote workshop, eRemote use case in Work Package 4, we will be improving the visibility of the progress to the user beyond in progress, but actually to make it much more granular for them as well to see, because we do have this information, but now we need to assess with the users, the facility managers and others, how to best present this to the users to make them more included and even more involved in their remote access project. So in summary, ARIA is an access management system. It can be used for physical and remote access, however you choose. It allows users to choose their access modality, whether it's remote, the service they want to use, and it allows workflows, which is really, really important to have those and have them customized to each service, how it is most appropriate, whether this is a month-long process or maybe it's a process that's only 3 days, but it allows flexibility so the facilities can make that communication as best as possible with the users and also their own organization of the process. And the communication pretty much starts from the very beginning, so it can support the user all the way through the process, even sometimes it goes beyond that to actually the data processing afterwards if the facility and the user have a relationship that supports that. And then obviously it really, really supports long projects and tracking the process, and we're constantly working on improvement, which is what we're doing in this project. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you want to know anything more, feel free to contact us in various ways. We're always happy to